Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So I'm jumping on today to do my weekly outlook, and this will be the weekly outlook for the week commencing the 21st of March 2022. So before I do get started with the actual outlook, I will just draw your guys' attention to the written version of this outlook, and as usual, this written version will be linked in the description for your guys' reference. And if you are grateful for this content, please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Alright, so let's get into it. Alright, so Nzdusd. Last week I was looking at the bearish sell thesis on the Nzdusd. We have this order block here, and then we've seen this reaction coming away from it. But as I spoke about, we had that break of structure on AU, which also lined up with the 12-hour here on the Nzdusd. And what we've seen is price has just come back into this order block here, and now we're continuing with the bullishness. So what we've actually seen is a daily break of structure going above our sell thesis invalidation from last week. So right now, from a daily perspective, that idea of sells really has been invalidated, and based on that, I have now changed my bias to a bullish bias on the daily time frame. So following through with that logic, we've got a break of structure here, and if we look where that originated from, it's really come from this sell move here. So when we refine that down, it's this candle at the low. So that is our order block that caused a break of structure. So this week on Nzdusd, just looking in terms of following this bullish sign that we've been given here, I'm going to just be waiting for price to retrace into this area, and then we can look to sell away, buy away from that area. Now, of course, it could still be a liquidity grab this above this high here, then we continue down, but at the end of the day, we've got to go with what's being shown to us, and what we've got is bullish break structure, bullish order block with imbalance. So for me, the logical expectation is bullishness. So that's what I'm interested in this week on Nzdusd. Now, if we just look at the 4-hour, it's very similar. So what we've got is this break of structure here. Sorry, the break structure is there, but it's still the same range. So we're in a range from this high to this low down here, and well, technically on the 4-hour, it's actually there. So looking at the 4-hour, we've got a break of structure to the high coming from this order block down here. So for me, what I'll expect is a retracement down into this order block and then to buy away from it. And obviously that ties up perfectly with what's happening on the daily. What we have got is this big wick here, which trickles into this area. So what I probably do is just refine this order block here a bit lower, so that we can expect the liquidity under that wick to be grabbed if we are gonna come below this wick, and then we can go up from there. So Nzdusd this week, for me, I'm just interested in following this buy thesis, and hopefully we'll get price action similar to this path tool. Alright, so moving on to Audusd. So AU, it's a very similar situation. So unlike Nuvo, last week we'd already broken structure bullish, so we had this impulsive bullish move, and then I had marked off the 4-hour refinement of the daily, which started with that imbalance there. And as we can see, it's just tapped into the area that I marked, and then it's flown off to break structure again on the 4-hour. Now, unlike NU, we've not actually broken structure again on the daily, because we're still within the range from this high here to the low down there. So from that perspective, you know, we've not got our new daily order block. We're still reacting from this order block down here on the daily on AU. So what I'm really expecting now is for price to just break again this high, and then we probably will see some more bullish price action coming in before we get a retracement. So based on that, really, at this point, because we've reacted off here and we're now moving up impulsively, we can just look for excuses to sell on the hourly. So I mean, if we start to see, you know, well, on the hourly, excuses to buy on the hourly. So like we see here, we've got break structure 1, break structure 2. So really, on the hourly time frame, the next place to buy out of is literally just there, and then it'll go. So For me at this point, because we've got so much of that bullish nature in there from the reaction of this daily order block, any excuse to buy on the hourly or better, if we can get the confirmation entries on the minute time frames into that, then I don't see anything wrong with that at all. But just looking at the 4 hour, we do have this breaker structure here, which did originate from down here, and you know, the cleanest refinement in fairness is probably that. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if before we do actually break the high, we will actually retrace back down here into the 4 hour zone, and then we can trade off this 4 hour order block, which is the 4 hour confirmation entry from the daily order block. But like I say, we have just got so much bullish nature in this price action that honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we just continue with this hourly uptrend. So until we get the hourly structures getting broken, I'll be following the hourly, and then if we do get the hourly structure broken here, then I'll just be expecting a retracement back down to the 4 hour order block, which reacted off for daily. So that's AU this week. So we've got really the whole buys away from the daily, which is happening. But then in terms of how to actually trade that, we've got the 4 hour order block down here, and then the 1 hour order block there. So either of them absolutely fine for me to trade away from. And you know, there are other bits of demand in this whole move here, so I'll leave that to your guys' discretion to identify other areas of demand in this range. So moving on to EU. So EU, last week I was talking how we had the reaction here off the 3 hour, but like I said last week, we have this area, and if we did continue away from there, then I was expecting bullishness. And as we can see, what's happened is price literally just went up all week away from this 2 hour demand zone that I identified last week. So at this point now, and since we've tapped back in further into it, I'm not too interested in this whole 3 hour supply area. Now, you know, it is still valid that we could be continuing away from this 3 hour supply after we've now gone deeper into it. But for me, and with the overall structure, I'm more interested in these two zones up here. So from a daily perspective, we do still have our 2 consecutive bearish breaks, so we know that we're in a bearish bias, and that daily break did originate from up here. So from a daily perspective, I'm expecting bullish price action until we get into this area, and then we'll sell away from there. That said though, it is, you know, quite a significant retracement considering if we do have all this bullish orders in the market, and if the institutions are trying to make us go bearish, sorry, not bullish, bearish, then we might not get all the way up there. So that's why I've marked this lower zone on, and it ties up with the 12 hour, it ties up with the 6 hour, and I believe the 8 hour as well, yeah. So this is the 6 hour, 8 hour and 12 hour order block, which actually caused the daily breaker structure. So for me, that's also a very interesting space, and we could see price selling out of there. So EU this week, I mean, you could take intraday buys just to bring us up here because it is 150 pips up there. So potentially them short-term buys, and then we can look for sells from this zone here, which is, like I said, the 12 hour, 6 hour and 8 hour order block that calls for break structure. And failing that, if we do break above that, I'm still going to be on the sell bias, but I am going to be looking for sells out of this accumulation up here, which is the order block which caused the whole daily impulsive move. So that is EU this week. GU. So GU last week I marked out this. I mean, the structure is still the same on the daily from last week. Now for me, I am looking at sells out of this order block here until we do see the violation of that. So really, I think it does just make sense for us to just continue down in an aggressive manner. But that does depend obviously on what the institutions want to achieve this week. So I do think that we could just see sales out of there, and absolutely I'm open to sales out of there. But all things considered, we do have this clear base here, which caused the first break of structure bearish, and it's got a massive imbalance there, and it's still not been mitigated. So it wouldn't surprise me to see price liquidate these highs and then come to mitigate this area. And likewise, with the same logic, we've got this more extreme zone, which is the actual extreme of this whole bearish move. So for me, going into the week, I will expect sells out of here because we've still not violated the high yet. But because of these two zones, I do think that this area is overall a lower probability sell area, but it could still happen. And then if we do violate the high here, I'll be watching for sells out of firstly this area, which will be an order block on the lower time frame, and on the daily it's a base. So look, on the 12 hour it's a proper order block. So I will be looking for sells out of there if we do get in there, and then if both those areas get violated, I'll still be on the sell bias most likely until we violate this high here. So for me, there's three opportunities to sell from a daily perspective, and I will be interested in all of them. So I'll be watching the hourly time frames as we get into these zones. Now, just looking briefly at the 4 hour, what we've had on the 4 hour now is breaker structure to the high, but we've only had one. So we are still technically in bearish trend on the 4 hour, even though we have seen this bullishness kicking in. So, I mean, really going into next week, I won't be looking at buys until we violated this area. If we can get this next break of structure coming through, then we can look for those buys following through the 4 hour to take us up to this higher zone. But if that doesn't happen and we do start to see the sells coming in, then absolutely there's no reason why the sells can't just continue away from this order block. So if we do see sells and we fail to break the structure again on the 4 hour, then I will follow through with the sells hopefully. So that's GU for this week. We're selling out of these areas, and then if we do violate this area, we can look for them buys to take us up higher. So Euro Pound. Now, like I said last week, at the minute on Euro Pound, I'm shooting the weekly because that's what's clearest. So on the weekly, we've got this high here, this low, and we've got our bearish bias because we've been breaking structure bearish. So for me, if we don't violate this high, we should just be continuing down, following through with this overall downtrend that's going on. Now, you know, this week we have traveled back up into the high to mitigate, and it does look like we're struggling to break through it. So, of course, we're going to have to see what actually happened on the hourly time frames because we could easily still break through it. But for me at this point, I think it's fair to just start looking for sells because at the end of the day, we've mitigated this weekly order block now, and we've got all this space down here, which is also supported by this whole bearish bias. So it could be a good week or two for Euro Pound as we see price move down to fill all this space here and then break structure again on the weekly. So for me, I will just be looking, I mean, on the 4 hour right now, I'd want to see this low broken here, and then I'd look for sales out of there if I'm following the 4 hour with it. And we can look for something like that on Euro Pound. So we'll have to see what happens, but definitely since we've got all this space here and we do seem to be reacting from a weekly order block, I'm definitely looking for sells this week on Euro Pound. Alright, so finally moving on to Pound Yen. So Pound Yen, I've been looking at the bullish thesis for a while, and I had marked off this more extreme refinement, this order block here. Now, whilst it's not major structure on the 2-day, if we actually look at the 2-day, the whole order block really that caused that impulsive move was this bearish 2-day candle here. So on the daily, it consists of this candle and this candle here. So even though we've got that imbalance, I think it's absolutely fine that price has just reacted off the open of this candle because that is the actual order block. So we'll just look at it on the 2-day for now. So on the 2-day, we've had the mitigation of this area, and then you've got that impulsive nature coming in, and it does look like, you know, the bullish volume has started to hit the market. So for me personally now, I'm definitely in a bullish bias on the pound yen, and I'll show the 4 hour in a minute. But if we look at what's going on longer term, well, we have this big bullish bias, this big bullish impulsive move. Then it sort of widened out into this larger correction, but we still seem to have, you know, that bullish nature within it. So what I'm expecting is basically just a continuation of bulls away from this whole corrective structure, and then maybe we'll get some more impulsive nature coming out of the other side of it. So, you know, considering what's happening in the bigger picture, and considering the fact that we've just come off a bullish order block, which was a pretty significant bullish order block, I think the bullish bias is very high probability on GJ, especially for this week coming. And also as well for the bullish bias, we've got all this liquidity up here, which is pretty much the well, you've got this high here, and then you've got relative equal highs throughout this area. So there's going to be a lot of liquidity up there, and I think from the institutional perspective, they're definitely going to want to bring price higher now, at least take this liquidity out, and most likely to go higher. So in terms of where to buy from, I think at this point right now, the best thing to do is following the 4 hour. So looking at the 4 hour, obviously I was looking at sells to take us deeper. That's not happened, and we've actually had a break of structure. So in terms of where this break of structure came from, which invalidated the sell thesis, that came from this order block here. So for me, the most, the strongest order block on the chart, the strongest demand is here, because that's what actually invalidated the sell thesis, and also we've got imbalance there. So ideally for me on pound yen, we're going to be buying out of this area. So Monday we'll open hopefully, and then see price break below there, and then we can just wait until we can buy out of here. But that said, we have then had a second break of structure after this one, which has left behind this order block here, which in fairness does start there. So looking at this, I mean, right now we have our structural invalidation point down here, even though the overall thesis invalidation would be down there. So what we could see is price just come into this order block and then continue away from it. So for me, I'm open to both situations. Either price just comes in here, starts to reject because there's so much bullish orders in the market, and then we can look to buy away from there. Or, the institutions do come down, take the liquidity below this low, and then they'll start buying out of this demand zone here, and then they can continue from this demand zone up to break structure again on the daily time frame. Alright guys, so that's pound yen, and that's the forecast for this week. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and if there's anything that's not clear, then do just check out the written version of the forecast, because that does have obviously all the written descriptions of what I'm actually expecting. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you all have a safe trading week, stick to your trading plans, and if you enjoyed this content, please do subscribe to the channel. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Cheers.